So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for this basic skills session, Bicycle Safety Quick Check. You might want to have your bike handy as we go through the presentation. Today's virtual event is brought to you by Repair Café Newburyport. The Repair Cafe is a joint project of the Time Trade Network of Greater Newburyport and Towards Zero Waste Communities. I'm Elizabeth Marcus, and I'm a member of the Repair Cafe organizing team. I'll be handling the technical aspects of today's program. So now I'm going to go through and introduce you to the rest of the Repair Cafe team. First, I'm going to bring up Wendy Levitt, who is on site at the, don't wave yet, Wendy, I'm bringing you up. There. Okay, there's Wendy. Wendy is on site at the in the area where Jim and Nancy are going to be bringing the program to us. So there she is. You may hear her voice chiming in now and then as we go through it. All right. So the second one I'm going to introduce now is Beth Monroe. All right, there's Beth. So Beth is our writer-editor, checks all of our grammar and makes sure that our words make sense as we go through this. And next, I'm going to introduce you to Margaret. So Margaret's going to be monitoring the chat and handling your questions to ask Jim at the end. And Kristen Walth is going to be monitoring the program as we go along, and she's going to give us suggestions for how we might do better in the future. Hopefully do some more of these programs in the future. So we're all disappointed that the remaining 2020 Repair Cafes had to be canceled because of the social distancing requirements. We really miss seeing you all, and while today's event can't replace a full Repair Cafe, it will teach you skills that can help you avoid repairs by learning how to prepare your bike for a smooth and safe ride. Okay, now I'm going to change the spotlight over to Jim and Nancy and introduce you to them. So we're pleased to have Jim Goldberg and Nancy Rader with us today. Jim is the owner of Newburyport-based Easy Rider Tours and will be presenting how to do an ABC quick check on your bike. Jim and his wife Nancy are longtime touring cyclists who started Easy Rider Tours together in 1986. Each had just finished biking across the U.S. when their spokes intertwined at a New England contra dance in Cambridge, Mass. They've lived in Newburyport since 1993. Their company operates end-to-end biking vacations in New England, Prince Edward Island, Portugal, and Spain. For information on their tours, see www.easyridertours.com. Both Jim and Nancy are Repair Cafe veterans. Jim will be presenting and demonstrating, and Nancy will be the videographer. The program will be, first, how to perform an ABC quick check, then the proper way to oil your chain, then they'll be covering the bicycle rules of the road for safety, and finally, suggestions for beautiful routes to ride in the greater Newburyport area. As we go along, please be sure to type your questions into the chat as they occur to you. At the end of the presentation, Margaret will consolidate your questions and address them. It's all yours, Jim.
Okay, welcome everyone. We're really fortunate to live in such a beautiful area for biking. And first thing I'd like to talk about is the importance, before you jump on your bike, of knowing how to do a quick safety check. I'm going to demonstrate that in a minute. And in the process of learning how to do this simple method of a quick check, you'll get to know your bike better. Think of it as getting to know your inner bike, because you're going to learn a little bit more about how a bike works. this is something you should learn to do, whether you haven't ridden your bike in 6 days or in 6 months. You should always do some kind of a quick safety check. So it's really easy to remember because we have a simple acronym. It's called the ABC Quick Check. The A stands for air in the tires, the B for the brakes, the C for chain, quick for quick release lever on the wheels, and check to check the bike over for any loose parts, and finally check taking it for a test ride around a couple blocks to make sure it's shifting into all the gears and braking under a hard stop. So I'm going to get into the details of how to do that. First, you'll need a little bit of basic equipment. The most important thing is a good bicycle floor pump. And by that, I mean floor pump, it stays at home. You don't carry this with you. But it makes it quick to put air in your tires, and it's much safer than going to the gas station to try to inflate a tire. So it's worth investing in something like this. The features to look for are a pressure gauge that indicates the PSI, or pounds per square inch, a valve. It has 2 sides to it for the 2 different types of bicycle valves you might encounter. I'm going to show you what those are. And finally, a lever lock, that holds the pump securely onto the valve. This particular one, it's made by a company called Joe Blow, which is a name I love for bicycle pump company. But there are many good brands out there. So, to explain the different types of valves, actually, let me finish up with the equipment you might need. First, bicycle pump, chain oil. This particular one, Finish Line, is a good product line. It says wet lube. If you have a choice between wet, dry, wet is a little more viscous and will last longer, so it's probably a better choice for around here. Several rags, and finally some type of a bicycle multi-tool. This is about the simplest one you could get. The idea is that it has Allen keys or hex wrenches that will fit things on your bike. It has to be metric. So if you go to a bike shop, it's a simple $15 item. This one has, besides the basic metric sizes, it has screwdrivers, which is really handy to have. Phillips head and flathead screwdrivers. And finally, you might need a bucket of soapy water if your bike is really filthy. You might want to wash it off first. Something like Dawn dishwashing detergent cuts grease really well. So you'd soak the bike up, rinse it off, and dry it really thoroughly, particularly the chain, if your bike's a mess. So that's the basic stuff you need. Now, first of all, in the ABC check, we have A for air. So you're going to squeeze the tires, and if they give, you probably need more air in there. The tire should be pretty hard, pretty firm to the touch, to squeezing. To get air in the tire, and also to know for sure how much to put in, you're going to use that floor pump. So first of all, see what kind of valve is on your bike. If it's a valve like this, it's a Schrader valve or American valve, same as a car tire. And then it's really simple. You're going to find the end that fits, squeeze it on, flip the lever, and pump away. Now, to show you on the bike, the other type of valve, a press the valve, if you'll close up here, both valves will have just a plastic dust cap. It unscrews. The press to valve underneath the cap is a lock nut. And you just loosen that, and you want to tap it to make sure air can get in and out. They sometimes get stuck. You find the fitting for that, press the valve, squeeze it on firmly, close the lock, the lever lock, and pump away. To remove it, just reverse the lock and pull it straight off. Most likely when you bought your bike, the bike shop showed you this and you bought a pump, but it's easy to forget. So one more detail I want to show you, your close up again. Just remember to, after you're finished, to close the lock nut. It's so air doesn't accidentally escape if you tap that. And you can replace the plastic cover. So we're on A for air. At the same time, once you've inflated your tires, I forgot one thing. To know how much air to put in, on the sidewall of the tire, you probably won't be able to see it, but it'll say inflate to a range of pressure. This one says inflate to 45 to 85 PSI. It's quite a wide range. You're going to pick a number perhaps just in the middle, but the idea of that range is that it's based on your weight to some degree. So if you're a heavy guy, you want to go at the higher end of that. And how much cushion you want in the feel, the ride of the bike. So a softer pressure will soak up the bumps easier, potholes and such. But if you go too soft, below the rating, for instance, you're more likely to get a flat, just like underinflated car tires. So pick a number in the middle for now, inflate to that pressure, read the gauge on your floor pump, and you'll be good to go. Okay, that's the tire inflation. Next, you're going to check the condition of your tires. So again, with A for air, you have a quick look at the tire, going around it to check for any deep cuts where you could actually see the tube coming through, any big bruises in the sidewalls. Some bikes that have older gum walls, sidewalls are called, they get actually gummy on the outside if they haven't been used in a while. And any, as you spin the wheel, any hops in the tire, any big side-to-side wobbles that are either in the tire or they might be in the rim itself. Any of these things are a message. Take me to the bike shop. So you want to get a tune-up because the ABC Quick Check is not a substitute for a professional tune-up from a bike shop. It's to let you know if your bike's safe to hop on it and ride. So if you see those things in your tire, you need to replace the tire. Just have the bike shop do that. Eventually you'll learn. If you see the wheel rubbing on the brakes side to side, you'll probably want to take it to the bike shop for a tune-up. Then we move on to B for brakes, ABC. So the brakes, you're going to apply one brake at a time. The handy thing about a bike is to alphabetize. So you have R, right is for rear. So right-hand side is the rear brake. It's also the rear shift levers. So apply the rear brake fully, put some weight on the saddle, and try to rock the bike forward. If the wheel doesn't move, your brakes are grabbing well. If it slips like this, you probably need new brake pads. Again, take it to the bike shop for that. You'll do the same thing on the back, putting weight on the bike and trying to roll it forward. Then you'll check to make sure the brake levers aren't bottoming out against the handlebars. By that I mean there needs to be a bit of space when you close the lever all the way, say a thumb's width. If the lever is actually hitting the bar, it's going to interfere with your braking. Then you'll check the brake pads. So you'll squeeze the brake. You want to make sure the brake fitting fully and completely on the rim, not set too high so they're hitting the tire, which would eventually give you a flat, or too low, which will wear them unevenly. So nice and square against the rim. And from above, check that the brakes are centered, moving equally side to side. And again, make sure the wheel is not rubbing. You'll also want to have a look at the wear on the brake pads. Some of these things are not the steps you need to do every ride, but say at the start of the season and partway through, you want to check the wear on the brake pads. So to illustrate that, we have a brake pad, and as you can see, it has these notches in it. Those are wear indicators. So once the notches are mostly disappeared and worn down, it's time to replace your brake pads. They're a very inexpensive item, starting at maybe $10, $15 a pair. You want to have the bike shop do it. And it is something, if you ride your bike a lot, that you probably need to do every year or two. If you don't ride your bike a lot, you're going to need to do it anyway, because if your bike's sat in the basement for a year or two, the brake pads harden up and they lose their ability to grip the wheel. Okay, that's B for brakes. Then we have C for chain. So here, you want to have a close look at your chain. First of all, if the chain is really full of gunk and grease, you'll need to clean it. You may need a product like Simple Green, a degreaser, to spray on it, rinse it off, and dry the chain really, really well, and then oil it. I'm going to show you that last. If the chain is completely dry and worse yet, rusty, you definitely need to give it a drink and oil your chain. Again, I'll teach you that in a few minutes, but the number one thing to remember when you oil your chain is don't use too much and dry it off completely, because excess oil just attracts dirt and you wind up with that sludgy chain like we were talking about in the beginning. So going back to the chain, when the chain has just the right amount of oil, you'll be able to touch it and get just a tiny bit of grease on your hand, not a lot. You don't need to oil the chain that often. I ride 4,000 or 5,000 miles a year, and I probably oil my chain once every 3 weeks or every month. Depends on the conditions. If it's been out in the rain, if it's dry and dusty. So you want to touch your chain, see what kind of shape it's in, and you'll want to, when you check the chain, the very first step actually is to pedal the bike forward to make sure it's in gear. It may be like this, not in gear all the way. So if you pedal forward, it's engaged in gear. Then you'll be able to back pedal. It should be nice and smooth like that. If you're getting a kerchunking noise, every time the crank makes a revolution, there's probably a bent tooth on the gears here. Again, better to take it to a bike shop. If you're getting a kerchunking noise every 5, 6 revolutions, you may have a stiff link in the chain. Oil can solve that, perhaps. So can wiggling the chain side to side. So that's the chain itself, but then we have the cranksets here. And once or twice a year, it's a good idea, or if you haven't ridden in a long time, it's a good idea to grab both the sides of the cranks and try to wobble them side to side. There should be absolutely no play side to side. If there is, take it to the bike shop. It's definitely a sign you're ready for a tune-up. Okay, it's C for chain and cranks. Then we have quick, as in quick release. So have a look at how your wheel attaches. Most of you will have a quick release lever like this that opens and closes. Some of you with a really old bike might have wheels that bolt on, and an adjustable wrench is what you'd use to tighten that. And some of you with a new bike and disc brakes might actually have a different type of axle that you do tighten by turning. But most of you will have this quick release. It's really important to know how this works, because tighten it properly, when it is tightened properly, when you close it, it should be quite firm to close and require the palm of your hand to close it. To adjust that, first of all, this says closed on the outside, and it says open on the other side. It's also curved, so you can see closed is curved towards the bike. So to adjust the quick release, first of all, I'm going to show you what it looks like inside. So you have the lever, you have a knob on the end, and as you tighten this knob, it puts more tension on the lever when you close it. So on the bike, we'll open it, and I recommend you do this on your bike once we're finished. We'll open that, and let's say it was loose, no resistance when I close this. So you're going to hold the lever end and tighten the knob a little bit at a time until you feel resistance when it's closed halfway here. And then use the palm of your hand and close it all the way. It's important to align the quick release skewer or lever with the bike frame, or else have it pointing back. The reason is, if you close it and you leave it in this forward facing position, it's very easy for it to become unhooked accidentally, to get caught on a bike rack, for instance, and it gets pulled open. So you don't want that. Have it pointing in line with the frame or back. And it's the same with the rear wheel. So that's the quick release, Q for quick. Some of you actually will have a seat attachment with a quick release lever that works exactly the same way. So if your seat is slipping up and down like this, you adjust the knob on the end to a point where when you close this, it takes a lot of pressure and it'll hold the seat post in place. So that's your quick release. Then the last step of the ABC quick check is to check the bike over for any loose parts. So I like to start in the front, hold the wheel between my legs, and see if I can move the handlebars this way, rotate, as well as up and down. I have been on a bike ride where a friend of mine's bars suddenly moved downward because they were loose up here. These kinds of things that can loosen up is where you use the Allen keys or hex wrenches in the multi-tool. But if you feel you don't know what you're doing, if it's not obvious what to tighten, take it to the bike shop or look online. So I started the front with the bars. I check the seat to make sure it's not moving side to side or up and down. Check any accessories, so water bottle cage, it's not loose. Your rack. Again, I don't do these steps every ride, but once in a while I do. What I would check every ride is the air, the brakes, one at a time. Have a look at the chain to see if it's desperate for oil or needs cleaning. We push release. I'll just look at it and make sure it's closed. But if I had the bike in the car, I would open and close it to make sure those are working right. So that's the check, and then you want to test ride the bike. So by that, I mean to definitely apply the brakes both together while you're out riding around a couple blocks. Make sure it can bring you to a hard stop. Shift into all the gears, make sure it's shifting correctly. Now, I told you I'd demonstrate how to oil a chain properly. Most people use too much oil. And first, let me show you what a chain looks like. You have these side plates here, and rollers or bushing in the middle, and rivets that hold it all together. All you're trying to do is to get oil into the moving parts of the chain. So this junction here, and this junction on the other side. So what you'll do when you oil it, I'll demonstrate in a minute, but you're going to be dribbling a thin stream from above onto this edge and onto the opposite edge, working it in and then drying it off completely. So let's take a look at the bike. The first thing to do, I like to do, is to put it in the hardest gear. So the further the chain is away from the center of the bike, the harder it is to pedal. It's a good way to remember it. So you can just take it out on the street and ride it to shift it into the highest gear or hardest gear. Position it maybe between two chairs like this so that you're able to turn the cranks. And then slowly hold the chain, maybe brace it, your hand against the wheel like this, and dribble. Whoop. Sorry, let me get more space. Okay. You'll drop a very thin stream of oil going around about 5 revolutions. That's why we put it in the highest gear, so you turn it for fewer revolutions and you can count. After about 5 revolutions, you'll have done the whole length of the chain. And then you'll do the opposite edge. You'll work it in really well. And it's good then to let it sit for 5 or 10 minutes so that oil can work its way into those joints, come back to it, and then you're going to dry the chain off completely. So you're going to hold the rag around the chain, and you'll have to do this over and over and over until you reach a point where there's very little oil coming onto your rag, because you just want that oil in the joints that I showed you, the moving parts of the chain. And finally, I like to dry off these little pulley gears back here to get rid of all the oil that's collected on those. They tend to get really gunked up. It's a little hard to reach in here, but okay. So again, the key thing with oiling your chain, don't use a lot of oil. Don't oil it until you need to. Dry it off completely. Okay, those are some of the basics of ABC Quick Check, and hopefully you learned a little bit more about how your bike works. before we start with questions, I want to show you a few more things. This is what I bring on a bike ride. I like to keep it by the back door so I don't forget anything. And we'll talk about safety as well, but bright colors are really good when you're biking. I bring sunscreen, put it on first, a rear view mirror, and some of you will have one on your bike, but this one, besides being the ultimate in fashion statements, it goes on your eyeglasses, and once you get used to it, it's really great for being able to see behind you. It works very well. There are also mirrors that will attach to your helmet. Then I bring bike gloves, which are totally optional, but if you're going for longer rides, they make it more comfortable. Sunglasses, of course. A blinky light is the technical term. A flashing light is really great for attracting the attention of drivers, even during the day. So it's a basic safety item to have now. Energy snack, most importantly, water. That's where the bottle cage is nice to have on your bike. And a bell is great, particularly if you ride on the bike path much. A mask these days, which I wear around my neck, and if I'm in a more urban area or on the bike path, I'll pull it up. Hand sanitizer, again, these days. Money and ID. And most importantly, a bike helmet. Actually, second most important is your phone. You need to have a backup plan if you have a flat and don't know yet how to fix it. That's another webinar. So you have someone you can call to pick you up. And Google Maps. Don't forget, if you don't know where you are, just look on Google Maps. So those are things I like to bring with me. In terms of rules of the road, number one is always ride on the right-hand side of the road. By law, you're required to do this. And in terms of safety, it's actually a pet peeve of mine. When people are coming straight at me on the wrong side of the road, it's a dangerous situation, particularly if I'm in the bike path and they're in the bike lane, say on High Street, and they're in the bike lane and we're heading head on and they have two little kids following in their footsteps. So don't set a bad example for your kids. Teach them to ride on the right-hand side of the road. Also, it's a good idea not to ride on the sidewalk. We have lots of quiet roads that I'll talk about in a moment here in the greater Newburyport area. So keep to the right, stay off the sidewalk. Also, when someone's on the sidewalk, if they go darting into the road, drivers don't expect that. Other safety considerations are be predictable. Probably my two favorite words when I'm talking about safety. You want to let everyone, drivers and cyclists, know what your intentions are. So signaling your turns, slowing or stopping. If you're in a group of cyclists, the accepted way to do that is to say slowing, stopping, or to hold out your hand like this. Making eye contact with drivers at intersections. Come to a stop if there's cars at an intersection. More or less obeying the rules that a car would obey. But the law also says keep as far to the right as is practical. So you don't have to be all the way over in the gutter. Claim your space on the road. It is legal to ride side by side in Massachusetts if you're not impeding traffic. So just a lot of this is common sense. Be visible. So the bright colors, your helmet actually helps with visibility. And when you're riding on a bike path, this is really important. let people know you're coming up behind them. So say on your left and pass them on the left if it's possible, or just say coming up behind you, but let them know and be courteous, project a good image for other cyclists, and thank pedestrians once you pass them. I mentioned a mirror and a bell, particularly for the bike paths. So those are some safety basics. A lot of it is common sense, but it's easy to get caught up in the moment and not think about riding safe. Once you get in the habits, it becomes second nature. So, good places to ride.
Since we have a couple of minutes still, do you want to talk about helmet fit?
Sure. I already got a question from one of our staff. Helmet fit, which is a very good question. So the idea here is, first of all, make sure you put it on in the right direction. I've seen riders, I don't know how they do it, but with their helmet on backwards. So it's pretty obvious these days. Most helmets have a head retention device. Sounds kind of nasty, I know, but this is an innovation in the last 20 years or so. It has a dial or two straps that slide toward each other. So you turn the dial and it makes it snug against the back of your head. Then you adjust the straps so they come right around your ear, forming a Y. That's the second step. And also make sure your helmet's in the right position when you do this. 2 fingers over your eyebrows. And then you tighten under the chin last. It's easiest to do all these adjustments in the mirror the first time. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Hey. So in the greater Newburyport area, we have really wonderful back roads for biking. It's in many ways the epicenter of cycling on the North Shore. Obviously, we have the coast, we have Plum Island, but even though there's a bike lane, that's a fairly busy road to bike out. And if you're nervous on a bike, maybe it's not your first choice. Head for some of the back roads we have. For instance, from the south end, if you head out from Newburyport on High Street towards Newbury, and you can turn right onto Green Street, go out to either Boston Road or Hay Street, and that'll connect you to Newman Road and Old Town Hill. Most of those roads, there's just a very, very occasional car going by. At the end of Newman Road, once you go up the hill and down, 1A does have a good wide shoulder for biking, and it's pretty flat. If you're in the north end and you take High Road out towards the high school, turn left on Dale Street, past the high school, it will connect after after 2-3 miles to Plumber's Lane, which is a road that's closed at the moment to cars, but open to cyclists and pedestrians. It goes past the reservoir, and it'll lead you to Middle Road in West Newbury. That's another nice direction. Both of these are what I call my escape routes. I need good quiet roads as a way to get out of town. The Merrimack River Valley has really nice roads on both sides. So in a moment, we're going to show you a slide with some good resources for where to ride. The Coastal Trails Coalition is one of those, and it's based around the greater Newburyport area, including Salisbury. It shows the bike paths we have here on both sides of the river, which are short, but just beautifully landscaped. And it shows some good quiet roads for biking around this area. Then there's also a link in the slide to the North Shore Cyclists. That's a bike club that's based here on the North Shore that I'm active in, full disclosure. But they're a great group. They have different levels of riding. It's a good way to learn new routes. Until we resume when it's safe to have group rides, you can look at the North Shore Cyclist website. I put in a link to our route library, and you'll find some really nice longer rides all over the North Shore that are 25 miles, 20 miles, and longer. So you'll see those links in the slide. So I think we'll open it up to questions now.
Yes, Jim. Great. This is Margaret, Jim, and this is great. I have my bicycle here in my kitchen, so I've gotten up several times to look at what you've been doing. So it's really helpful. We have a couple of questions. One of them is about the glasses and the mirror that you had.
Yeah.
Can you buy that in the area?
Yes, Riverside Cycles, I think, sells that one. The one I showed you is made by a company called Take a Look, and it's distributed by Trek. So I would first start with Riverside Cycles. Also on that resource list, you'll see Riverside's contact information. They're here in Newburyport. And Pedalin' Fools, which is a great name. Dave Riker operates a mobile bike service, but he also sells bikes and components.
Perfect. And you've also mentioned a couple of products today. So first, let's start with the lube. I know you mentioned you use a wet versus a dry. Any other preference? And what vendors do you use or products do you use?
Well, I like Finish Line. There's Pedro's. There's so many well-formulated chain oils. But the most important thing is to go to a bike shop because they'll sell the right kind of oil. They'll give you advice. You could make an argument for even the tip. This one's a little wide, so it's a little harder to get the oil quite where you want it. But you do want it to come out in a nice slow stream. And I do recommend the wet. I've tried the dry version of this, and it just doesn't last very long, even though it keeps the chain cleaner looking. But like I said, if you don't use too much oil and you dry it off completely, your chain will stay cleaner a lot longer.
Okay.
And don't oil it too frequently, only when you don't have any signs of grease or oil to the touch.
Okay, great. Jim, on the cycling helmet, you told us a little bit about how to fit ourselves for it. Are there any things that we need to do to a cycling helmet to maintain it as well?
Yes. Eventually, cycling helmets, well, two things. One, if you're in a crash and it absorbs an impact, they're meant to be single use. So at that point, you should get rid of the helmet. There's a couple of helmet manufacturers that will accept helmets back and give you a discount on a new one, and they use it for research. But no matter what, you shouldn't keep using it if you're in a crash, even if there's not a visible sign of a crack or damage. So you have this rigid foam liner that absorbs the impact. And now some companies have developed newer systems, but they should be ANSI or Snell approved. There's a sticker inside that says they're safe. Again, if you get something from a bike shop, you're heading in the right direction. And the other thing is the shell, when it's exposed to ultraviolet for years and years, it loses its strength. So a helmet should be replaced every 5 to 10 years or so, depending on how much you use it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Couple of other comments. You've mentioned a lot about riding a lot. And so riding a lot to me is when I ride 4 miles in a day. Riding a lot to you means something very different. So you ride, what did you say, 5,000 to 6,000 miles a year?
Yeah, 4,000, 5,000. Anyway.
I haven't done that in my lifetime. So when you talk about the things on your bike, when you say you should oil your chain if you ride a lot, or if you're with the helmet, you just said that. What's a lot to you when you're saying that? Is that a casual rider, or is it someone like you?
I'd say based on the amount of time your bike spends outdoors. So if your helmet's out in the sun, for say 10 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's a fair amount.
Okay.
And year after year, that breaks it down. But just a good rule of thumb, if you're riding 4 miles in a day, typically, and you're riding a few months out of the year, probably want to replace your helmet once it starts to get faded looking. It might be 15 years or so, but also the technology improves over time. So keep all those things in mind, that at some point it's a good idea to replace your equipment. The chain, you're going to wait until it's dry and shiny to oil it. So that varies a lot depending on the condition.
Okay, great. Do you have a favorite brand of for bikes for longer type riding? You know, for touring bikes. Do you have a favorite brand?
What do you mean by touring?
Well, longer riding, like what you do when you'd go out on tours. Is there a brand that you would recommend for that kind of riding?
Again, go to a good your local area bicycle dealer, because there are so many good bikes, and the technology from higher end stuff keeps trickling down, and bikes are getting more comfortable. If you're going to use it for when I hear touring, I think loading up your bike and taking off for multiple days. What works very well for that now is a type of bike called a gravel bike. It's also very popular these days, so bike shops are carrying them. And again, every manufacturer has them. The big companies are like Trek, Cannondale, Specialized. But the gravel bike has a tire that's as wide as the hybrid tire over here. So it's not a skinny racing tire. And you can use it on rougher surfaces. Some people are riding them on dirt trails even. But it can take more abuse. And it's going to have a little bit lower gearing for getting up the hills, more powerful brakes. And you're really not giving up anything unless you're a hardcore racer. You're not giving up anything these days. They might weigh a pound more or something. So they're a good option for a good all-around bike these days.
Okay,
It
great.
depends how much you want to spend as well.
Good. And that's called a gravel bike.
Gravel bikes, yeah.
Okay, good. Do you have any recommendations for lightweight but strong bike chains?
Right, that is something else to carry with you if you're planning to make any stops. So again, I'd go to the bike shop for advice. If you live in an urban area in Boston, you may need a big U-lock. But here, if I bring a lock at all, it's a coil cable. They weigh a pound or less, and it's a decent enough thickness that someone couldn't cut through it with a quick snap, but maybe 5/16 inch thickness or 3/8 thickness. But again, I tend not to carry a lock, and I just keep my eye on my bike. But I'm riding in very rural areas here, and I'm really not stopping and leaving the bike.
Okay.
Excuse me, yeah. This is Paco Villalobos, Linda's husband. I just have a comment, and that is I appreciate your detailed information, very welcoming, and I'm ready to go and do all the things. But I really enjoy your presentation. Thank you.
Great. Great to hear from you.
Great. Well, we've come to the end of our time here. So, Jim, thank you very much. In just a few minutes, we're going to be posting the slide of the bike and other resources. This wraps up our virtual cafe, except for the sharing of the slides, as I mentioned. We really want to thank Jim and Nancy. This has been wonderful. You've compiled a list for us, and of course, for sharing your time and your expertise. We also want to thank all of you, our virtual visitors, for joining us today. And if you have any ideas for future cafes, please send us an email at RepairCafé-NBPT@gmail.com. So take good care and happy cycling to everyone. Bye-bye.